Hi guys, it's your host Josh from Recovery Talks 24/7. We've got an amazing interview today with a gentleman called Chris, who is the founder of a company called Getting Clean. He's come on today just to share a bit of his strength and hope of his life of addiction and how he actually got about starting the company called Getting Clean. So Chris, without further ado, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm really good. Thanks for having us, Josh. Thanks.
That's all right. Thank you so much for coming on. Um, Chris, obviously, I just want to get to the point and hear your amazing story because we had a brief chat before, about your life and what you went through in your addiction. So, can you share that with the people that are listening today?
Yeah, not a problem. I'm Chris Sylvester, founder of Getting Clean Community Interest Company. I'm an addict in long-term recovery, and I was first introduced to heroin as a child. The very first place that I tried it were in high school toilets, and I was 12 years old. I'd had lots of problems leading up to that, sort of environmental sort of situations and experiencing trauma. And I would always seem to be destined and drawn to substances. And like that first time that I ever took heroin, it kind of filled this void that I had. It kind of gave me everything that I was lacking, and yeah, sort of from that point on there, I was registered as an heroin addict at Leeds Addiction Unit, where I'm from in Leeds. And that were at age of 13, 14, excluded from school, and then into a life of crime from being a kid. Sort of
Wow.
first experiences of that were just petty crime, stealing bikes, shoplifting, stealing teachers' handbags, video equipment from school, whatever we could get as kids, we'd get and we'd score, we'd turn it into drugs. From
Yeah.
age of 15, I started going to prison. The first time that I was sent to prison, I were I were remanded for a Section 18 charge for stabbing somebody in Bradford, nearly killed him. And upon release from prison, I went straight back to that life. What I knew, right through to sort of, I'd say, to the age of 20, addicted to heroin and crack cocaine. At the age of 20, I was sent to HMP Leeds. Now, I shouldn't have been sent there. I should have been sent to Doncaster Marshgate, which is a young offenders institute. But I'd worked out that if I lied about my age and added a year on at magistrates court when I were up for a bail hearing, when I got remanded, which I knew would happen, I'd get taken to HMP Leeds instead of Doncaster. And I did that because I knew my girlfriend at that time would be able to bring me what we call fat visits. So she'd bring drugs into prison for me. And I thought rather than her travelling to Doncaster, she just travels to Armley, where we're from, no problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah. Um, Is there anything you'd like to ask me about that? Because do you know me? I speed through things and maybe slow
Yeah,
down, man.
that's fine. Do you know what? It's great to kind of hear from obviously the age that where you started it from because I've noticed from hearing other people's stories, and obviously there's going to be listeners as well that are going to go, do you know what? I really relate with that because a lot of people they start from a young age. So you've kind of given us a bit of a story now where you started taking drugs at a young age. You've now gone in and out of jail. That's your sort of lifestyle that you've adapted to now. You don't know anything else but that. So when you was going through this process, was there any point that you would say that somebody might have maybe dropped a little seed in your head to kind of go, Chris, what you doing? Is this the sort of life? When did that sort of happen for you?
So it were, if I'm completely honest, it were all a game, and I always viewed life as a game. And when I first were introduced to heroin, it were really exciting. I had problems fitting in. I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. And as soon as I'd started taking this substance, I were part of a community. So it were rife where I were from, my age group and people, my peers that were older, that were all doing it. It absolutely decimated my community, did it during 90s, late 80s. And then sort of throughout the activities and the involvement in crime, I found it all really exciting. It was thrilling, and I surrounded myself with people that they wouldn't have said, "Oh, what you doing?" Like they'd have shown me how to do it. Like they taught me how to be a criminal. Uh, I had a real issue with any authority or anybody that were a positive influence because that's not what I were about. I were embraced by negativity and I were drawn to it.
Yeah. And I totally relate to that as well, with the whole authority. Anyone that tells you anything, what you're doing is wrong, it's like, nah, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. So when like you said, you've adapted to this lifestyle now, did you, when did you start to realize that you had a problem? And when did you make that decision to change?
So the first time that I really saw heroin and crack cocaine as being a problem is that time that I told you about initially when I was sent to HMP Armley, Leeds. Um, my girlfriend that was supposed to be bringing me fat visits up and bringing drugs into prison for me like she'd done in Doncaster. She stopped answering her phone, and then she didn't come to any visits. And I started hearing stories from lads that were coming in that she'd actually become a working girl, become a prostitute, and to fund her habit. And this absolutely broke my heart because when I met her, she didn't take heroin, and I was the first person to give her it. And it made me really look at my actions and my behaviour and what I'd done to somebody. Um, and that had quite a profound effect on me. And I didn't understand addiction at that point. So it was like, I realised I've had enough of this game with heroin and with crack. You know, I'm not going to take them substances anymore. But because I'm an addict and I understand what that means now, I can't get through a day without taking some. So my addiction quickly is replaced by, a lot of something else, and that something else, namely at that time when I was released, were party drugs, ecstasy, amphetamines, and smoking lots of bud, smoking lots of cannabis.
Yeah. And this as well, like, how was your mental health through all of this as well, Chris? Did this really like suffer with your mental health? Did you go for any sort of, mental health problems
Up
throughout
to
this
that
period of time?
point, I always struggled with my identity and knowing who I am. Like I said, I never really felt like I fit in anywhere. I always had low self esteem and not a lot of confidence. Although I could come across really confident and I could be very challenging at times, inside I didn't feel like I had anything. I didn't feel like I were worthy. And I used to pretend to be other people, and these other people potentially used to be movie stars from gangster films. And I think, how would they act? And I never really had a relationship, an understanding of who I am as Chris Sylvester. I like I were I were drawn to things that attracted me, and I knew what I liked in that respect. But internally, I was always in turmoil and conflict with myself. So I never
Yeah.
really had a period where I knew how Chris was or his mental health was. I'd have highs and lows, and they'd be influenced by substances that I was taking. My life had always been lonely up to that point, but I'd never allowed myself to feel anything because I'd always numbed myself with substances.
Yeah. And it's totally true what you're saying there. There's probably some listeners now that that's all they're ever used to. So they've never really experienced any feelings and emotions. And I know it's quite a daunting thing. So as soon as you've, come off these substances now, you must have really started to experience these feelings and emotions. So how did you cope through all of that? Did you have any sort of anywhere you could go to get support and kind of identify with other people that may have gone through what you've gone through?
So at that point, I'm still focusing on when I released from HMP Everfor, and I'm into party scene, and like I've said, I didn't really look for any support because things haven't become that bad for me at that point. I was managing to maintain my addiction to other substances, albeit not a physical addiction, definitely mentally, like I couldn't get through a day without taking something, depending, what I could get or what I were involved in. Um, and I never really, the mad thing is, I never really saw any help. So I might have gone to a service or treatment provider for a script, but I ain't got any intention of getting clean because for me, like the answer to my problem were always in another substance. It wasn't in, like complete abstinence, which is what I live a lifestyle now based on. It were always there were going to be something there because I couldn't face life without having something. So, I got myself involved in some quite serious crime, and I nearly lost my life. Somebody tried to end my life, and I ended up in hospital and then being released into community after I was stable. Um, and at that point, I went back for that comfort, which is heroin. And I ended up getting back involved with heroin then, probably around the age of about 24. And then from age of 24 until 36, I was just into it hard. And there were people trying to engage with me, professionals, but I just wanted that place where I was receptive. I was always focused on changing how I felt and avoiding having any sort of relationship with myself because it just wasn't a concept that came to mind. I was focused on my main objective, which was changing how I feel. And then the first time that I were introduced to any sort of support where I was receptive were mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing.
No, that's so you've gone through that period of time now where you've hit it really, really hard. So I'm guessing, did you ever kind of have a period where would you have classed yourself as like you kept relapsing all the time as well? Did you try and get clean and then relapse, try and get clean and relapse, or was it you just hit the drugs hard and then decided that you needed to change your life around?
So the period where I were on party drugs and involved in party drugs and sort of dealing them and producing them and growing cannabis and things like that, I never really believed that I had a problem because I always thought I were in control. Even though when you look at my life, it was completely unmanageable and chaotic. Because I were able to achieve small goals in certain areas that were always negative, I always felt like I were in control of my life. When I became back involved with heroin, it stripped me of everything, my relationships, any sort of material wealth that I'd accumulated when, nobody wanted anything to do with me. And I went back to that loneliness, that isolation, that dereliction. And from that point there, I wasn't really focused on sorting myself out. I was focused on getting drugs. So I didn't see any period of sort of recovery taking place or having mindset that I was going to stop what I was doing. Because like I've said, it was just one substance or another. And that's where my
Yeah,
addiction manifested itself until I was at age of 36.
yeah. So you got to the age of 36. Is that when you started to realize that you wanted to change and get
Well,
clean?
yeah, so well, it's amazing. This story makes me smile when I think back to the person that I was, how I was living my life, and how powerless to addiction I was. It would absolutely, it makes me smile because my life is unrecognizable to that now. Um, so at the age of 36, the sort of situation and scenario that I found myself in, I were a PPO, so that's a priority prolific offender that's released from prison with license conditions, and them license conditions, they say and state that I have to provide clean urine samples for my probation officer. Now,
Mhm.
I'm an addict and I'm not in recovery, so that's not going to happen, you know.
This,
There's
yeah,
no chance of that happening. I could tell you it was going to happen, and I could convince you, and I could convince myself that it was going to happen. But the thing is, my addiction always speaks louder, you know, and it always convinces me that I'll get away with something, even though I know in my heart that as soon as I pick up a substance, namely heroin, you know, I've just turned like an egg timer over, and them grains of sand that are falling, they're just hours before I'm back in custody or into another situation which is potentially threatening my life. So I'm released from prison. I've got these conditions. I need to provide urine samples that are clean, and I've just been released from hospital. So I'd been admitted this time for an infection in my groin because I was injecting in my groin, and it was like I'd got this cellulitis infection, which meant my legs swelled up really big. It was red raw. It was really sore. I couldn't bear weight. I was just hobbling. I was a wreck, an absolute wreck. I'd not long been released from prison, and like everybody around me, my dad had just died, and my mum was desperate that I sorted myself out. And I had to go to probation, and I knew that I was going to get recalled because it was going to be a dirty sample. So when the sample come back and it was positive for heroin and crack, cocaine, I I was given an opportunity by my probation worker, you know, and like I'll always remember this because she said there were a volunteer within probation that mentioned, you know, attending a mutual aid meeting, you know, peer-to-peer support, a 12-step meeting. It's got anonymous in the name. I had a problem with narcotics, so you can come to your own conclusion there with where I went. And she said to me, "You want to go to this meeting?" Now, I hadn't finished school, but I knew what anonymous meant. So when my probation worker says to me, "You want to go to a meeting," and in reality, she doesn't even know if I've gone or not, or do you want to go back to prison for 2 years? My addiction sees an opportunity. So I'm quids in. Obviously, I'm going to go to this meeting. But the thing is, my addiction had already told me that this meeting wasn't going to work, that nobody in this meeting was going to have lived like me, used drugs like me, been in and out of prison all their life like me. And it was just so profound, you know, when I did go and the door opens and it's somebody from my past life. Now, this guy, you know, like I used to buy weights of crack off him to sell. I didn't know that he took. I didn't know that. I thought he might sniff coke partying or whatever, but I didn't think that. I didn't think that he took class A drugs in way of cocaine in rock form. I thought he might have sniffed. That's it. But when I saw that he were there, and he took me to the side and he said, "Chris, if you carry on, there's three things that's waiting for you, and that's jails, institutions, and death." Now, I knew what he was saying were right because I'd experienced all of them. So I'd been in and out of institutions since I was a kid. I'd been in and out of prison since I was a kid. And the amount of times that I've been resuscitated and brought back to life after overdoses, being involved in car accidents that were serious, had people stabbing me, trying to kill me, trying to end my life. You know, I'd had all these experiences, so I knew that death wasn't far away. So
Mm.
when he said this to me, the penny dropped, and I thought, do you know what? He's right. You
Yeah,
know, and I'm hobbling into this meeting now. I can't even stand up properly. I'm killing myself. And I sat down and I listened to what was shared, and it was just so powerful because all these feelings I'd had, all these insecurities, all these struggles and problems that I'd faced, I wasn't the only one that felt like that, but I always believed that I was, because nobody ever communicated how they were feeling. Nobody ever spoke honestly around what were going on for them. Everybody had always had a mask on, like me. Nobody were willing to talk about all this stuff that made me feel really uncomfortable, that pushed me towards drugs and trying to mask everything that were going on, and trying to just get through a day. There were people, and they were being honest, and they were supporting each other, and they had a solution, and they were happy, and they were smiling, and they looked healthy,
Yeah.
and like walking into that meeting, I initially felt like I had everything going on, because I had my mum blagged. She'd moved me back in. Started giving me money so I could get to meetings and buy dinner. Obviously, I'm going to score with that money. I'm an addict. I'm going to manipulate her. I'm going to manipulate my probation worker. I'm going to manipulate everybody around me as long as I can until I end up back in jail. But my addiction will tell me I won't end up back in jail. You know what you're doing. You'll get away with this. You'll get away with that. And I quickly understood how powerless I was to my addiction. That were like a massive moment for me. So yeah, that's how I
That's
found.
amazing. That's amazing. That's really, really encouraging. For anyone that's listening as well, that's on the podcast, that if you could see this gentleman, Chris, right now, you wouldn't think, he's gone through all of this stuff, but it goes to show, you stepped out. There was an opportunity that was there that was from the probation officer. You thought you could blag them, but you went there and you actually got something from it, which is just absolutely amazing. And being able to relate with other people as well, which is very powerful, because 9 times out of 10, we always generally think we're the only people that are going through it. Hence why, hearing your story, Chris, will be such an encouragement for, giving people strength and hope that they're not alone. So you've now gone into the 12-step program. You're doing that. So how long have you been clean for now, Chris?
So now I will celebrate. Well, I'll tell you what. I've got a clean time counter on my phone. Check this out.
Go ahead.
I give you a live update now, right now. Yeah.
Okay.
So at this very moment, I am 6 years, 8 months, and 8 days clean.
Fantastic. That is absolutely
All of the
amazing.
mind-altering substances.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
That is amazing, Chris.
this is the thing. I couldn't get through 6 hours without using, or without at
Yeah.
least thinking about using. Every time that I
Yeah.
was in prison, all I'd be obsessed with is getting as much medication that I could get from doctors there, and then thinking about what I was going to do when I got out.
Yeah.
Whether it be one drug or another, I was just obsessed. And that's what I learned about addiction, that obsession and that compulsion that goes with it. Dictated my actions for a long time, but now I'm celebrating a decent bit of clean time. And my life has absolutely, it's transformed, the transformation. It's a miracle, it really is.
Yeah. There's an absolute miracle. That's amazing, Chris. So now we're going to move on to, you've got a lovely jumper on, I can see. It says very clearly Getting Clean. Looks amazing. You've got a banner behind you. And I'd love to just know about, what is Getting Clean, Chris? How did you start it?
So, whilst attending meetings and being involved in my recovery and working a 12-step program, I learned so much about myself. I learned who I am as Chris Sylvester, an addict in recovery, you know, and I started to develop an understanding around these spiritual principles, like honesty, humility, open-mindedness, willingness, and I embraced them in my life, and I gravitated towards support work because I'd never worked anywhere. I'd always been involved in crime in one way or another. I didn't have an education. I didn't know what else to do with myself. So I gravitated towards support work. So I was supporting homeless men and women in Leeds, and I'd constantly see these same faces coming back through. Same with prison system, you see same faces coming back through, coming back through homeless services, going back through prison service, and it's like, something. There's root causes of problems here that aren't getting addressed, and I was learning so much in my own personal recovery that I realised that lived experience had so much to offer. So I went about setting up a volunteers group initially to tackle environmental issues in community, because I understand that I'm a product of my environment. So in my mind, if we can create better environments, better communities where we feel like we're part of a community, we feel like we belong somewhere. All my life, like I said, I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. The first time that I got that is when I entered into recovery, into a mutual aid setting where there were people that were willing to share their recovery with me. That's where I felt like I belonged. But addiction faces such stigma that it's really difficult for anybody involved in recovery or addiction to be reintegrated back into society and feel like they're part of a community. So set this volunteers group up. So we'd go out and we'd pick litter. But when we pick litter, we're looking at recycling it, not just putting it in these bags at side of the road to be collected, because I quickly learned that these were going to an incinerator and they were being burnt. Now that's no good for planet, that's no good for environment. Big picture, what I wanted to do was have a positive impact on my community, on individual lives, but also on planet. It's important to me. So this group started to grow and more people got involved. And as they did so, I learned that there were lots of skills available within this group and that we could apply our hands to different projects to assist the community. So we went about creating wildflower meadows, doing conservation work, and then doing repair jobs for vulnerable, elderly, and disabled citizens in our communities. Fixing fences that were damaged, doing garden makeovers for people, decorating, DIY, whatever we could do as a group that'd mean these people come together, learn how to do something, and provided, a service for somebody vulnerable in community. It meant that we were challenging stigma and we were changing perception of addiction, but we were feeling like we were part of a community and that we had some value, and that's where the empowerment is. So Getting Clean were formed on the back of this volunteer group. I come up with idea at name because obviously we're in recovery, but going out and cleaning and carrying our message of hope to community means that people can come empowered, and progress in their lives and the recoveries. Everybody needs purpose. And what I've learned through my recovery, the teachings of recovery now come through actions in community, finding this new way to live. It's so important. So we started in 2021 as a volunteers group. 15 months ago, we were formed as a community interest company with a board of directors. Now, a community interest company is kind of like a charity, but you don't have a registered charity number. So if you fundraise, you're taxed at 20%. And I didn't want to be reliant on grants and funding. And I realised, we want to create pathways to employment. One thing that I learned in my recovery, which is really important to me, is about being self-supporting, and looking after myself, not being reliant on benefits, rebuilding myself up and contributing, not costing taxpayer loads of money through going to prison or through addiction treatment or impact to NHS, all that stuff there that's really costly to society. I wanted to contribute, so I wanted to get up and I wanted to go to work. But the job that I found and the job that I did, I didn't feel like I were helping people enough. You know, I worked
Mm.
for commission services that were all about delivering outcomes. They were about positive outcomes for a service, but not necessarily for the people that we were supporting. And I knew that I could do so much more using lived experience, and that my peers and people that were involved could do the same. So when we formed as a CIC, we realised that we need to provide services and products to generate income. So I came up with Getting Clean CIC.
Yeah, which just sounds amazing, which is what I was literally just about to jump on. We spoke about it before we obviously come on today, and I really want to know more about this soap that you guys sell.
Yeah,
If you could tell us a story behind that, that would be brilliant.
so this is soap with hope. Yeah, it's got it inside. It says hope inside. I'll show you on another bar in a second more clearly. So that's lavender, ylang ylang, and it's made with charcoal and pink clay from natural ingredients by hand in a therapeutic workshop. So we're bringing people together again, teaching them how to do something. It then means that we have a product which we can take to market. So we'll go do stalls, fairs, we sell online, but we engage with public, and that helps us again challenge stigma and change perception of addiction. It makes recovery inclusive. You know, this Soap with Hope, you can see it more clearly there. So
Yeah.
this is our first, and this is really special. This is our first test batch of our sustainable circular soap. Now I know it's not circular, yeah, in shape, but it's circular by way of tackling climate change and the circular economy. So this is made from ingredients which would have been going to landfill and being incinerated, which obviously has a real negative impact on the environment. So we now intercept products destined for sort of being disposed of by whatever means, and make it into a really good product, and that
Mm.
again helps us fund our activities in community. It means that we can go out and do odd jobs, repair jobs, or whatever it is we're doing for old ladies and old men and disabled people, whoever it is that needs our help. That's what we do. And I've got these
That's
on
amazing.
as well. Look,
That
so
looks amazing as well.
this is a lonely chicken, yeah.
Yeah.
So, AKA Recovery Rooster, and that's knitted by a group of elderly citizens that now come together. You know, loneliness, I relate to that massively throughout my addiction. You get a lot of elderly people. We found that in community when we're doing as repair jobs. The irony is they live streets apart, but they don't communicate. They don't know each other. You know, whereas if you bring people together, provide them with recycled materials, and a purpose, they have a quality of life. The life is transformed, through that contact, through feeling like they're giving back to the community. So they're knitted
Mm.
up by this group for us, and
That's
then we
amazing.
sell. So yeah, it's
That's great.
it's
So even so going back to the soap, Chris, so I'm sure obviously each one of them bars of soap, she was saying they've got a story behind it, right? So there's
yeah.
people that
So
have made them and they've got a story.
this is part of somebody's recovery journey, and it's like we realised quite quickly that we need to support people throughout that process. So we've developed a partnership with Professor David Best, the first professor of addiction, who has a recovery capital model, which we've started to incorporate into our workings. So when we're working with people, we assess where they are in their recovery and we look at the recovery capital. So that's on a sort of personal recovery capital, community recovery capital, and societal community capital. And what we do is we look at barriers and unmet needs. And this allows us, it's kind of like a SWOT analysis. This allows us to work out what's going on for our volunteers, throughout this journey of recovery, to make sure that relapse prevention is implemented and that recovery is sustainable. But yeah,
Yeah.
like you said, this bar is part of somebody's story. It's part of their recovery journey. It's amazing.
Yeah.
We say, beautiful. That's how we do it.
That's amazing. And I can imagine you guys doing that when you're on the market as well, trying to sell them on.
But listen, I'll tell you about now. You see this bar? This bar reduces crime. This bar tackles climate change. This bar means that some old lady is going to get a fence fixed. Yeah. It means that somebody's going to be able to enter and continue a journey of recovery, and that stigma is challenged, and that recovery is inclusive in Leeds or wherever it's purchased, because it's a bar of soap that when you use it to clean your face, you're also cleaning streets and you're helping challenge stigma. So it's got a lot of social value.
It's sold. It's definitely sold. Amazing. And you must get so many great conversations going with people as well, when you do sell this bar of soap. Because when we was talking before, I know for a fact if I was cleaning my hands with that soap, it would always stick with me, knowing that I'm doing something good by paying to buy that. And you're definitely doing amazing things for the community, and it's absolutely amazing, Chris, what you're doing. And I would love to know, what are your sort of future plans for Getting Clean? Do you
So
have any sort of future plans?
yeah, so like I said, it's just we're constantly focused on creating pathways to employment for people. So we're kind of like the advert for recovery. So we're at the front door. We've started to work quite closely with our treatment providers in this area. So that's Humankind Forward Leeds. And that means that we can advertise, recovery by actions, by what we're doing. It's attractive. People that are struggling can see that, oh, these guys are doing it. They can get involved. So we can help people on this journey actually into treatment, through treatment, and into recovery, and then into employment, because there's so many opportunities with what's presenting itself. This circular soap business, this is going to be really big, trust me, because we're dealing with a number one global supplier of soap making materials. Now they've come to us because they see the social value in what we offer, and it's like with that comes lots of products, becomes there's lots of scope for creating opportunities of employment for people. But while people are involved in what we're doing, we've developed a tier system. We see them go through training, basic stuff just like safeguarding roles and responsibilities, all this kind of stuff, making sure that they become confident, competent, and capable. And then we train them in different elements, get work experience, give them a reference, help them with the CVs, and speak to other employers, other business partners, and create these opportunities for employment, because that's, for us, that's what the end objective is: helping people find purpose in their lives, helping people rebuild their lives, be committed to the recovery, being committed to the community, but then going on and finding employment, and being able to go on holidays and being able to help up, just help other people see, because it's by action, isn't it? Actions always speak louder, by seeing people engaging in life, that have come through this journey. It's just so inspiring. So I feel really proud. But pathways to employment is one of our main objectives. And for Getting Clean, just to help as many people as possible, to get as many people and make recovery as inclusive as possible is our main priority. To challenge stigma and to make recovery inclusive, and change perception of addiction.
It's amazing. And who thought, Chris, if somebody approached you years ago when you was in the madness and they said, you know what, Chris, you're going to be running a company, it's going to be called Getting Clean. What would you have said to him?
You're on drugs, mate.
And it's amazing what you're doing, and it's just getting me excited already just listening to what you've started, how much of a an impact you're making on your community as well. And may it long continue to be supporting and helping so many people out there. You're not just helping, the addict, but you're also helping the elderly generation as well, the people that are secluded, that are at home, and you're just including everyone. And it's just such a beautiful thing, Chris. It's amazing what you're doing. So how can the listeners kind of support your mission or kind of get involved with Getting Clean with CIC?
So give us a follow on social media, as platforms. If you just Google Getting Clean Leeds, it'll take you to his website. There's media links on there, social media links. There's some other media coverage that we've received from BBC and other bits and bats. Subscribing to our newsletters, subscribing. We've got something called Soaps and Suds, which is a subscription where people can subscribe to getting a bar of soap a month posted to them, and that massively helps us continue as work. But just share this podcast. Speak to people about getting clean. Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome.
Check us
Yeah,
out.
we'll definitely get the message out for sure. And I'm sure there's a lot of listeners on here that are probably very, very intrigued with that bar of soap as well. So to finish it off, Chris, I'd love to know from you, what advice would you give to someone right now that's struggling with addiction or might be listening to this podcast and they just don't know what to do right now? What advice would you give them?
My advice would be to try and be honest around your situation, and accept it for what it is, but understand that it's not the end of the road and it's actually a start point, and being able to have courage to talk about how you're feeling and what's going on for you, like I found it through attending 12-step meetings, and I can't say that enough to people because it helped me. And it continues. It's something that I'll do, we say just for today, but it's something that I'll do hopefully for the rest of my life because I keep on. The same more will be revealed, and it certainly is. The more that I'm putting into my recovery, the more that I'm getting out. But anybody that's at that initial point now where they decided that enough's enough, the truth is you never have to use again, and like it may seem like it's outrageous, but you don't have to act on your first thought. You don't have to do it. If you're willing to be uncomfortable and go through your feelings, whether they be physical symptoms of withdrawal, obviously safely with the support of treatment provider, if you're detoxing or anything like that, especially if it's alcohol, you just can't stop straight away like that. But like seeking professional help and then looking for that mutual aid, that peer-to-peer support, we're a LERO, we're a lived experience recovery organisation, and what we do is we use our lived experience to make recovery accessible for people, to help people overcome that. But that can also be found in these mutual aid meetings, this peer-to-peer support. But you have to be at a point where you're willing to surrender and say enough's enough. And for me, in that means that you have to be willing to take on suggestion, accept that you're powerless over your addiction without recovery, and get into recovery. Don't let your head tell you that it won't work for you. Don't convince yourself, that someone's different to you, or look for differences. Look for similarities. Do you know what I mean? That shared experience. Don't matter what the substance is. I've spoken about a wide range of substances. For me, I know that I can become addicted to anything. I can become addicted to social media because it changes how I feel. I can become addicted to food because it changes how I feel, and really all my addiction does is take me to a point of loneliness and isolation where I'm crippling myself, full of fear, full of anxiety, not willing to communicate, just becoming smaller and smaller. Whereas when I'm in recovery, I'm no longer powerless to my addiction. I'm empowered by the people that are around me, by being committed to it. And it's best decision that I ever made. Now my life is unrecognizable. You know, I do have a life beyond my wildest dreams, and it's all as a result of engaging in recovery. You know, so like have confidence to speak. You know, be willing to put that action in, and be open minded. You know, to what's being said, and be honest with yourself, man. Just be honest.
Fantastic, Chris. Chris, thank you so much for that. That was really empowering. And, you know, I don't know about all the listeners as well, but it really encouraged me today, you know, with your story, what you've been through, you know, related with a few bits of your story. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other people that relate with every bit of your story, just a little smidgen. You know, you probably have, even if you just help that one person,
Definitely, man.
that's the most important thing. But Chris, I'll just sort of say thank you so much. And for all the listeners as well, thank you so much for jumping on board to hearing Chris's story and how he started getting clean, sorry. And then what I'll do is I'll put some information out so you guys can get following about the amazing journey, what they're getting up to and all the soaps that they're making, all the knitting that they're doing as well. So Chris, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much again for jumping on the podcast. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.